Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. So glad that you're with us today to stay curious. And hey, we got Mark Watney with us over here. No, he's over here, Mark, okay? And if you know, I'm alluding to the movie The Martian, and there is our famous Mark Watney. And I know Connie McDaniel's watching one of her favorite movies, of course, there. And Marty Winkle picked this out of a handful of images we're going to show you today, but concepts of living on Mars, because after all, today is Future Fridays on Stay Curious. And we're going to talk a little bit about some Mars habitat concepts and just kind of some basics about it. And we already got the signal not to touch the keys already from Marty, as we do have a couple issues on Streamlabs that is happening. We don't know what it is, but we can overcome it. And when Marty gives me a thumbs up in a couple minutes, we can advance the images here. We got an astronaut birthday we'll be showing you here in a minute. And we're going to talk about the Artemis Space Accord. Okay, the Artemis Accord is being signed by countries around the world, so far 25 of them, to come to an agreement of how to conduct business in space peacefully and respectfully, and don't claim anything as your own type of thing. So this has a precedent. In 1967, the Outer Space Treaty was signed by over 105 countries of the United Nations, that we would not have war in space or nuclear weapons in space, and two, nobody would claim space as their own. In other words, like put down, the American flag and say this belongs to us now. Well, we did put the American flag down 6 times on the moon, but we did it for all humanity, and no one has claimed the moon. So, we're going to talk about a little bit about this Artemis Treaty. Who has not signed it is kind of important. Only 25 signatures out of the 120 nations around the world, and they want to get at least the spacefaring nations involved in it. And there's 3 or 4 biggies, good spacefaring nations, that are not signing the accord as of yet. And we'll tell you why about that. And we're going to look at company relativities trying to go to Mars by itself. All right, we had 2 private companies fail to go to the moon this year and crash landed. So that's what's on tap for Stay Curious today. This Friday, June 9th, 2023, is our 835th episode of Stay Curious. And I've missed 4 or 5, and Marty, my co-producers, missed just a handful of those. But we pretty much have stayed true to form now after 3 years, where we are honoring astronaut birthdays, we are touting the great legacy of the space shuttle era, and we're promoting future space activities. And probably the most important thing is we keep reminding you that for over 20 years, our U.S. Space Walk of Fame Foundation has operated the nonprofit American Space Museum. In where it's at right now, we've been at for 6 years. We actually own the building, but they were in 6 different locations, including 2 different malls here in the Titusville area. So we're blessed that we've got a lot of good mojo going. We're always having, we're a small, humble museum, so having 50 guests a day is a pretty big day. We always usually seem to have 20 to 50. And we have a handful of kids in here in our STEAM activities that our coordinator, Darren Roberts, is putting together, and has just been a wonderful way for particularly homeschoolers to learn about science and astronomy, as well as space exploration here, where it all began. We love saying that we celebrate the birth of America's space age right here in its delivery room, Brevard County. So let me get a sip of coffee here. Stay curious. Marty's writing down some of you that are watching the show today. And Marty, we're waiting out this little anomaly that we have. Hard to explain. We get a bright flash across the top of the screen. So the computer's froze up somehow, and it won't advance the images that we want to show you. And usually I have a pretty image-filled show. Let me get a sip here. Boy, I taste. Give me get another sip. Something good in that. I got my space shirt on today, but more importantly, you can't hardly see it with all this crazy shirt here, so I'll take it off. Here's a 50-year-old pin as we celebrate 50 years of Skylab 1 or Skylab 2. The first crew is actually called 2 by the engineers, 1 by the PR people. So think of that 50 years ago when you had Pete Conrad, Joe Kernwood, and Carl Weitz up there doing science, pioneering the science being done on the space station. Well, Marty's giving me the clear heads up there, so we're going to give a happy birthday today to Francis Drew Gaffney. All right, Francis Andrew Gaffney is an American doctor and NASA astronaut born June 9, 1946 in Carlsbad, New Mexico. He was orbiting the Earth on his 47th birthday 30 years ago on STS-40, one of our shuttles of the month that's orbiting the Earth in space history at this time in 1991. Gaffney was a co-investigator on an experiment that studied human cardiovascular adaptation to space. He's a heart doctor, and he did some pioneering work up there, including electrocardiograms and breathing devices on this life science mission of Space Lab on STS-40. It was his one and only mission, but that's enough to maybe for anybody out there. And he became a member of the Institute of Medicine Committee on Space and Biology Medicine, all right? He was a Vanderbilt University professor there in Nashville, and also a guest professor in Stockholm at the Karolinski Institute. And in 2007, he said he started beginning his 145th orbit around the Earth as he took his sailboat that he'd traveled over 30,000 miles. So happy birthday. There's some good-looking pictures of you there, giving a lecture there to Drew Gaffney. Hope that you're sailing your boat somewhere at age 77. He's the pride of Carlsbad, New Mexico, Marty. Well, Future Fridays is what we want to stick to, and sometimes we're going to bring in some new space company people. We're in touch with Via Space, our hometown 3D printed rocket company, and they're going to join us at the end of every month, so we look forward to that. And today we're going to just kind of take a quick look at Mars habitats in the 21st century. So we'll get to that here in just a minute. But let's get to that outer space treaty and the Artemis Accord. This outer space treaty was signed in 1967. It was truly a United Nations event. 105 companies across the world signed it. And you know what? In 56 years, it's really never really been challenged. And the two things that it wanted to do was peace and sovereignty, okay? Outer space is to be used for peaceful purposes. Weapons of mass destruction cannot be used in space. And then number two, every celestial territory, such as the moon or Mars, is not subject to national claim or appropriation, all right? It belongs to everybody. And basically, when you've only got three spacefaring nations, America, Russia, and China, and China is entered late, you've got Japan and some other countries that have launched their own rockets too. But since 67 to like 2000, let's say, the dawn of the 21st century, it's just been America and Russia to be worried about. So everybody's kind of stayed in their own lane with this. China, though, in 2007, shot down one of its own weather satellites in test of its ground-based medium-range ballistic system. Japan called it an act of aggression, but once again, there's no police out there that can make a binding treaty work, including the Artemis Treaty we're going to talk about, all right? So the implications of not complying are simply sanctions against your country in some way, or lack of legitimacy and respect of what you're trying to do in the arena. But interestingly, though, Marty, in a half a century, it's never actually been violated. So why do we need something new? Well, because everything is new in the 21st century, including a lot of countries could get the ability to go to space and be a renegade outlaw, like Mark Watney was on Mars, the first space pirate, right? So let's look at that Artemis Accord and see what they're trying to address there. 25 nations have signed this accord so far. And the Artemis Accord lays out the framework for collaborating nations as we enter the lunar exploration era and beyond to Mars. The idea is to set out common principles, guidelines that best create a safe environment in low Earth lunar orbit, as well as extending safety and rescue capabilities to Moon and Mars and even beyond, as we may be looking at mining asteroids. And that word mining is something that I think is going to be a big stumbling block with some of the countries signing this or adhering to it. So let's look at this accord real quickly, a little bit close. The first, it's got 9 major points, the Artemis Accord, and it was just recently in the news because the 25th country, which was not Poland, but Czechoslovakia, I think, was the last one to sign it. 1, peace, of course, peaceful exploration of space. 2, transparency, conduct their activities in a transparent way that prevents confusion and conflict, and sharing information with the public, all right, in good faith, particularly scientific information. Quote, Artemis Accord signatories commit to the public release of scientific information, allowing the whole world to join us on the Artemis journey. Well, that's good for transparent America, but that ain't never going to happen in Russia or China, all right? Both are very clouded in secrecy what they're doing. China announced a week ago they want to be on the moon in the early 2030s, all right, or even earlier. So, will they be waving at the Artemis spaceship landing when after they get there? We'll see. Point 3, interoperability. All right, what this means is that same standards, all right, so systems can work in conjunction with existing infrastructure, enhancing both safety and space operations. Well, we're on the imperial system, Marty, of feet and inches, and not much of the world is, as I understand it. Most of the world's on the metric system, correct? And you being an Apollo era worker, I know that had to have some consideration when we took the command module of Apollo and docked it with the Russian service module, the Russian Soyuz module, and we created the interface for that, but the docking port. But my point is an Apollo spacecraft could not dock with the Russian manned spacecraft without an adaptation. So to me, I don't know if America's being a hypocrite there, Marty, because we've tried to go to the metric system, but I'm too old to be taught that, all right? And I don't know if that's a thing anymore in school that they're trying to convert America to the metric system. But that's point 3. So point 4, and by the way, a Mars cooperative mission failed 10 years ago because part of the program was in metric and the other was in imperial. And they conflicted and it didn't go into orbit around Mars. Number 4, emergency assistance. Well, that certainly makes sense that you would say we will use our resources to save your individuals in space. Registration of space objects, okay. Nations participating should determine and register their objects in space. Every object about smaller than this cup of coffee is being tracked around the world. In fact, I probably could use a bolt or a nut that things are being tracked that small. Preserving heritage. This is a biggie, I think. Artemis Accords signees say that they will not violate historic sites by degrading them or taking pieces off of them and bringing them back to Earth, all right? And we're specifically talking about the 6 landing sites of the Apollo astronauts. What if some space company would go to the Apollo 15 landing site, Marty, and just pick up that lunar rover and bring it back to Earth and say, hey, finders keepers, losers weepers, okay? Now you're going to pay a bunch of money to see it in my museum. Well, that's a far-fetched idea. Is it? I don't know. 50 years it probably wouldn't be. So we want to preserve the things that are on our Apollo landing sites, as well as Russia has 4 or 5 rovers that they've put on the surface of the moon, unmanned. So that's just an important one, preserving the heritage, and I'm all for that. 7, space resources. All right. This is the mining section of it. Resources being, they are asking to inform the UN Secretary General, the public, and the science community of space resource extraction activities. Now, it just says inform us what you're doing. It doesn't say you can't do it. Deconfliction of activities, all right? This includes harmful interference and creating a principle of due regard, as they put it, for your neighbors there, okay? If they do find gold on the moon's surface, underground, you know there's going to be more than one company going there to harvest it. So I don't know how they're going to create safety zones for this, but that's what this is all about. Orbital debris is the final one, and that almost should be up at the top, okay? Safe, timely, and efficient disposal of your spacecraft as part of mission planning, all right? That was not the case during Skylab, when we didn't know when it was going to fall. When it fell back to Earth in 1975, America's first space station was being occupied for the first time 50 years ago at this moment. But so that's an important thing, is that we don't want the sky falling on Chicken Little there at the Chicken Ranch in Texas. So, Marty, there are some absentees here as I look at another. Let's see, let's go there. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, there, I'm hitting the wrong one. Artemis Accords, united for peaceful exploration of deep space, all right? Guess who's not part of this? Companies are signing on to it, too, so that they basically, for that section where we will standardize some things. But no Russia, no China, no Germany yet, and no India. India is a big spacefaring nation. They, in fact, are 1 for 1 at putting objects in orbit around Mars, as they have a beautiful satellite that's orbiting Mars the first time they tried to do it. So, and some of the hang-ups are some of the points that I made here in there. So, also, the European Space Agency, ESA, as a collective conglomerate, is not there. Okay, you see JAXA is with NASA, Japanese space agency, but not Roscosmos or ESA per se. So still a lot of work to do, I think, to get this accord in front of the right people. Russia has already stated that the Artemis program is too U.S.-centric to sign. And, of course, China's absence is easy to explain. U.S. Has a congressional prohibition on collaboration with China on anything. So we can't even talk to China about saving our astronauts on our space station if something indeed happened like that. That would be something that would maybe break that silence. But we cannot collaborate with China, according to the U.S. Congress, on any scientific things. So be it there. Well, the Artemis Accord, what do you think about it, folks? Marty, what do you got, some comments there? Who's watching today? Let me get another drink here and let you loosen up your vocal cords there a little bit. Who we have staying curious on our 835th episode?
Well, we have Doug Forrest, Chris Callie, Gary Gerald, Carlton Bailey, Bill Whiting, Robert Law, Dave Stange, Tammy Miller, Cynthia Rossi, and Chalked.
Chalk.
Chalked.
All right, Chalked. All right. Might be a pool player there, okay? And I'd like to shoot some billiards here on Mars there with old Mark Watney. Well, let's move on just a little bit there. What is this spaceship, Marty? Well, this is that 3D company, Relativity, who's had a lot of success with the small sats, all right? They are a startup company that is trying to get to Mars before even SpaceX does. And they will launch, they hope, at the next Mars opposition in 2024, a small spacecraft. It's a 3D printed Terran rocket there that we show you, and a small satellite that was going to orbit, and then another one that's going to land. All right, of course, you're going to need a capsule for the journey, and then a re-entry rocket in there. So let's go forward there, Mark. There we go. And there's their little lander. And I couldn't get a good dimension on it, but I gather it's about 3 feet wide, 3D printed. And they want to get there. If they launch by 2024, the landing would be about 9 months later. So if they can pull off their plan, they just might be the first commercial space company, to reach the red planet. And they've raised over $1 billion in funding since they were founded in 2015 as a Relativity Space. And this is a company, they're trying to compete with Elon Musk, that says that they will be on Mars by the end of this decade, all right, with some support vehicles and landers. So that's just to tease you a little bit about some of the future that we're going to be looking at. As Artemis does prepare to go to Mars, there are some stages, of course, with the different the Gateway lunar orbiter could be converted to a gateway to go to Mars and have that habitability area that they think they're going to need. But they need to stage things in lunar orbit, is what they're thinking, to then send to Mars. So this is all such a drawing board situation right now, with a lot of these private companies bending their metal hardware right now to build low Earth orbit factories and hotels for us to enjoy, hopefully by 2050. The world's going to be a different place in 2050, Marty. I have a hunch. I won't be around to see it, but things are really aiming in that direction. So let's look at some of the habitats that I just happened to pull off and did a little book report on for you, like you all spent some time doing some surfing on the internet. This is a particular habitat that NASA has designed with modules on Mars, and this is more like the first expedition going there, okay? With a rover that would be a real necessity, particularly in the harsh environment of Mars. What are we looking at when we're building a habitat on Mars, okay? What actually has to happen? Well, first of all, Mars is not the place to raise your kids, is the old Elton John song, okay? It is cold. It is more like Antarctica. You've got to get in your head, if you're going to live on Mars, you're living in Antarctica, because every time you go outside, it's not going to be above zero. The winds will be brisk and so forth, but the atmosphere on Mars is so thin, all right, that you could not breathe it. You'd have to have a support system like was accurately shown on the movie The Martian. And NASA scientists, Jet Propulsion Lab people generally like that movie. There are a few blatant things that went wrong that would probably have stayed wrong, like very impossible for Watney to recreate that lab that he did and growing all the food after the door blew out on it. That would be almost an impossibility to do, and how he created the atmosphere and their lighting. That had blown stuff up there by probably, but the main thing is the beginning, where the winds on Mars would never get strong enough to topple anything, a spacecraft, okay? Winds on Mars blow dust devils. It's very thin. Think about really 30,000 feet or 7 miles up, 5 miles up on a mountain. You wouldn't have that little bit of air up there to breathe. So But because Mars does not have a big, thick atmosphere, and mostly carbon dioxide of what is there, you would be fried by the radiation from the sun. It would be like a microwave oven on you. In fact, you could put food out there probably and it would cook it from the microwave radiation. Now, Mars is about twice as far away from the sun as the Earth is. In fact, the Earth is around 93 million miles on the average. So say 100 million miles. Mars is about 200 million miles away on the average from the sun. Now, Mars and Earth get 40 million miles across from each other for about 4 months every other year, and the next time that happens is in 2024. And all of us stargazers will have our telescopes looking at it again. In a telescope tonight, Mars is just to the upper left of Venus in your night sky, okay? At the 11 o'clock position, up from Venus, you'll see red Mars, very, very faint. It's 200 million miles away. And in October, it was just 40 million miles away, and the brightest, almost as bright as Venus, if you can imagine that. So, hope you can imagine that. Well, this is what Elon Musk wants his Mars colony to look like in 2050, all right, with his Starship bases there, and there's your little civilization there. And he is honestly wanting 1 million people living on Mars within the next 30 years, all right? So we've yet to put the first living creature on Mars, but as we know, I think it could be done. A couple things you got to look at is food, all right? How you going to grow food? And this is a kind of an efficient looking farm on Mars. You would want to get as much sunlight as you could. Good news on Mars is they don't have big, thick clouds to block out the sun, all right? So when the sun's up, you can always generate electricity and have the photosynthesis going on. Of course, you can do artificial photosynthesis in facilities like this also, and they would do that without a doubt. Water on Mars, all right? You need food, you need water, you need air. Well, the air can be converted out of the carbon dioxide. And then there's a lot of ice buried underneath Mars. We know that. The soil itself may have water in it. Mars was a watery planet, but that was 3 billion years ago in its almost 5 billion year history. What happened to that water, we don't know. Could that happen to our water world Earth? Yep, you bet it. It could. So that's why we need to study maybe what happened on Mars firsthand so it doesn't happen here. Well, this was a very interesting concept that I like, kind of a cathedral look to it. But the first habitats on Mars aren't going to be very pretty, and they're also going to get covered up with dust, because dust is a very real thing on Mars. It's going to get into everything mechanical, and the red dust is caused by these gigantic volcanoes on Mars that belched for millions of years into the atmosphere of Mars, this iron that went, plumes of dust and gases, and when it landed on Mars, the moisture in Mars rusted it. So Mars is really a rusted moon. And when our rovers on Mars, and right now we've got 2 SUV-sized rovers, Curiosity's lasted 5 years, Opportunity's in its 2nd year. Not Opportunity, Perseverance. Opportunity was one of the 2, Spirit the other, Gulf-sized rovers that lasted for a long time. They get covered up with this layers of Martian dust. And the 2 rovers are nuclear powered, so it doesn't affect them. So this is a 3D printed structure, all right? You're going to need lights. You're going to need a safe habitat to live in from the harmful radiation that can go through concrete and so forth. So you're going to have special sort of X-ray protection shields on your habitats. And one of the ways to solve it is to go underground. Here's another look at, this is a habitat from the Martian style in there. A kind of a space age look where you could have different covers and so forth to let sunlight in. This is a habitat that is being used out in the Southwest in some of the Mars simulations simulations out there that they have had people live out there to try to be in confined space and act like they're on Mars. And as I take a swig, Marty, are you going to watch Stars on Mars? I know you probably saw the advertisement for that, didn't you?
No.
Oh, didn't you? During Ninja, I think they had it on. Not sure what channel is it. I think it is Channel 2 or NBC.
Yeah, I did.
But Stars on Mars, they've chosen two astronauts or two former football players, Marshawn Lynch and Richard Sherman. Two great players are going to be on the Stars on Mars. They're going to act like they're living on Mars with Lance Armstrong's one of them there. Ronda Rousey, I think the lady boxer, I think she's going to be part of that. So here we talk about habitats on Mars. So I'm going to watch that just to figure out where they got their habitat on there. And there was the Martians. Here's a very interesting one that I think has some potential, probably more what things would look like, is they create some space habs there and maybe make up a Mars mud that they can pat on these things, all right? They need to have some Mars people walking around there. And that lander beside it there could just be a container for storage now. So we got to think outside the box because Mars is a hostile place. All of this dust and so forth by the tracks of these vehicles, that would have to be almost paved, okay? And this is a big problem on the moon because the lunar regolith also is as fine as talcum powder. It's going to get into everything. But on the moon, we know that the moon's soil has glass beads in it from its volcanism period. So they found that they can actually microwave down lunar soil that they've simulated and made on Earth. And it makes it flat and melts it like a styrofoam cup, if you will, and then you got a flat surface to drive on. So until we bring back lunar soil, Martian soil, I predict will have a lot of microscopic glass globules in it because of these tremendous volcanoes. When I say tremendous volcanoes, there's a side of Mars that's lopsided like a big pimple because there's 5 volcanoes on it called the Tharsis Bulge, and one of them is the largest volcano in the solar system. It is 13 miles high, or maybe 17 miles high. I know that 500 miles away, if its caldera was in Atlanta, which is 500 miles away from here, I'm told we'd see it above the horizon looking north. So these are giant volcanoes. They have left their tail on this surface, and I'd say there's probably Martian glass everywhere. Well, this is a big complex here for 30 to 50 people, pretty much like an outpost at Antarctica. And that's what we hope, is that we create an Antarctica-like environment of scientists doing research on the moon as well as on Mars. And then to look out over yonder, up in space, this is the dream of SpaceX. But there again, a dusty, now this is a Mars. That's how the sun looks from Mars, quite frankly. Exactly like that. I think they've used a Martian picture from one of the rovers and put it there. And we've seen that. So going underground is a way to solve a lot of problems, but that might be a problem in itself. What is the tensile strength of that Martian rocks and so forth on the bottom? They've actually used a Martian picture here in the front to kind of illustrate that. So a lot of people thinking about a prefab situation here that has different rooms in it. And then we're going to have a Conestoga wagon, Marty. Then that reminds you of that right off the bat. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, rawhide. The wagon train days, all right? But that's what this is, folks, is a wagon train is what we're going to need of resources, fuel, food, structures, backup material, a ton of 3D printers to make what you want and make buildings and so forth. And it is truly going to be a Conestoga wagon type era when we do hit Mars with those explorers, those people that want to risk their lives and die on Mars. Yay, Watley up there. And this is thumbs up. He was sending back messages. If you've not seen The Martian, okay, but please do. It is about an astronaut they thought he was dead when a Mars storm caused the crew to have to leave Mars right away. So they thought he was dead, and they left him there, and he survived an accident, and they didn't know he was alive until somebody's researching Mars satellites noticed where he was, that things had been moved around, and they knew he was alive, and then he tried to communicate with them without any radar system or anything like that. It's a good movie, and sticks pretty true to its form, and everybody, of course, loves Matt Damon in it. All right, and he does do a good job. There's only about 10 actors in the whole darn thing. This was inside what it looked like in the Martian, the situation that they had there. Pretty open space area is what you're going to want. I think there's 6 or 7 astronauts on there, and they all had their private area, and that's certainly what you would need, is some of your privacy. This is a look inside of a Mars concept. One of those adobe huts there. Looks like somebody sliced up a potato there on the counter. Potatoes figure very richly into the plot of The Martian. And there is utopia for you SpaceXers there. Maybe that will be your home away from home someday, as you're in a Martian village, a true settlement on an alien world there. So it's going to be exciting, Marty. The only thing that they haven't invented yet in the 21st century is a machine to stop aging, all right, or a time machine to freeze us so we could see some of this good stuff. But an exciting time lies ahead the next 50 years for sure, as I think governments will go to the wayside, and private companies will come to the forefront and be the true explorers that push the humanity past the envelope and into the cosmos and the stars. So hope that you've all enjoyed this edition of Future Fridays on Stay Curious. Marty, thank you. We've got Daniel DeYoung has been watching, Spirit Airline pilot, buddy. Hope to see you soon. And Joel Jacobs, hopefully, has enjoyed this edition of Stay Curious. So Marty, we got out of the gate a little bit slow, but once again, while I'm ending here, I should have done this at the beginning, but we have some things that we can sell you real quick. We do have the Base to Space DVD, all right, about the Mobile Launch Platform 2 that was our Shuttle Fest 2 theme. Info at americanspacemuseum.org. And you can, these are hard to find, European edition. We got a Blu-ray of Skylab, Searching for Skylab, all right, in the regular format and Blu-ray. Blu-ray is $25 plus shipping. The other is $15 plus shipping, okay? And info at americanspacemuseum.org, or go to our website. You may call us on the phone. I know you can figure out how to get a hold of me. I am MARQ at americanspacemuseum.org. If you want to own these, we'll ship them to you. Blu-ray is $25 plus shipping, $15 for the regular DVD edition there. I need to see them. That's a definitive documentary on Skylab, and I'm going to save that for this weekend. So, thank you, everybody. Marty, you got something to say?
Yeah, Mark, I need to clarify something. First time you said including shipping, then you said plus shipping. So,
No, we're not including shipping. Thank you for clarifying that. No shipping. It is $15, $25 for Blu-ray. Shipping is not included. I apologize for that. Thank you. And that's why I need scripts to repeat this so I say it right. But everybody's got to pay for shipping. It'll probably be $5 to $10. So hard to find, actually. I did DVD it. That's a good price. So hope we can help you out there. Thank you for clarifying that, Marty. And we thank everybody for watching Stay Curious. And we are so proud to have you be our guest here at our museum, and check out our Facebook and
YouTube channel for past episodes of Stay Curious. And why don't you mosey on over to our website, maybe make a $50 or $100 donation to your favorite nonprofit, the American Space Museum and U.S. Spacewalk of Fame Foundation. So until we're going to rack it up and do it next week again, I'm so happy that you joined us today. And I am Mark Marquette, and I can't wait to see you again to stay curious and bridge the space between us.